Number 10. Velociraptor versus Protoceratops. The only fight in history we can actually watch. In 1971, a joint Polish and Mongolian expedition was working the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, in the red sandstone of a place called the Jadokta Formation, when they uncovered something no one had ever seen before, and no one has matched since. Two complete dinosaur skeletons, locked together, mid-combat, buried exactly as they died around 75 million years ago.
Paleontologists simply call it the fighting dinosaurs, and it is one of the most important fossils ever found.
Because every other prehistoric battle on this list is something we reconstruct from clues. This one we get to look at directly. On one side is Velociraptor, and here you need to throw out the movie. The real Velociraptor was about the size of a large turkey, knee-high, feathered, weighing maybe 15 kilograms. It was not the scaly 6-foot killer of the films, but it carried the weapon that made its family famous, a single enlarged sickle-shaped claw on each foot, held off the ground, made for one job. In the fossil, that claw is exactly where you would least want it. The Velociraptor has driven its killing claw into the throat region of its opponent, toward the major blood vessels of the neck. On the other side is Protoceratops, a stocky plant eater about the size of a sheep, an early cousin of Triceratops with a heavy parrot-like beak and a bony frill, but no horns yet.
It was not defenseless. In the same instant the raptor's claw went into its neck, the Protoceratops clamped its beak down on the predator's right arm and crushed it. You can see the raptor's forelimb caught in the herbivore's jaws. Both animals were committing to the kill. Neither was going to let go. What killed them is the part that turns a fossil into a ghost story. The leading explanation is that while they were locked together, a dune collapsed or a sandstorm buried them alive, freezing the exact geometry of a fight in progress for 75 million years. Some researchers have suggested the Protoceratops was already a carcass the raptor was scavenging when disaster struck. But the crushed, gripping arm argues for a live, two-way struggle.
We are looking at a real predator and real prey in the real act of trying to end each other.
There is a deeper reason that killing claw matters, and it overturns another piece of the movie myth. For decades, that sickle claw was imagined as a slashing blade for cutting prey open. More recent work on raptor biomechanics suggests something different. The claw was a grappling hook, used to sink in and hold prey while the animal pinned it down and fed, the way some birds of prey do today. The fighting dinosaurs fossil shows exactly that, the claw hooked into the neck, the predator gripping rather than slashing. And we know these animals were feathered, not scaly, because a velociraptor forearm was later found with quill knobs, the anchor points where large feathers attach, the same structures you would find on an eagle's wing today. The place that produced this fossil is a story in itself. The Jadokta Dunes were a Cretaceous desert prone to sudden catastrophic sandstorms and dune collapses, and they buried whole animals so fast and so completely that paleontologists compare the site to Pompeii.
The same conditions preserved nesting dinosaurs sitting on their eggs, and a small dinosaur curled up asleep, frozen the instant the sand took them. Protoceratops itself was so abundant in this landscape that some scholars think its skulls, scattered across the ancient gold mining routes of Central Asia, may have inspired the legend of the griffin, the eagle-headed, four-legged beast of Greek myth. The fossil is now treated as a national treasure of Mongolia and rarely leaves the country, which is fitting because there is nothing else like it on Earth. Scientists still debate the fine details, whether the pair was buried by a collapsing wet dune or entombed in a sudden sandstorm, and exactly how old the bed is within that late Cretaceous window. But the essential image is beyond dispute. Two animals of nearly equal size, one a predator and one its prey, committed so totally to the kill that they were still gripping each other when the world buried them alive.
There is a cruelty in that. We can study this fight down to the position of a single claw, and we still do not know who would have won, because the planet ended the argument for them. The only battle in the fossil record we can watch frame by frame is also the only one that never got a final round. Number 9, by contrast, left its evidence written directly into the bones of the survivors. Number 9. Tyrannosaurus versus Triceratops. The scars that prove they fought. These two are the most famous rivalry in the history of life. The armored tank against the tyrant king. And for once, the fame is earned, because both animals lived in the same place at the same time, the floodplains of western North America, right at the end of the Cretaceous, around 66 to 68 million years ago. Triceratops was so common there that by some estimates it made up the majority of the large dinosaurs in the ecosystem.
If Tyrannosaurus rex ate big herbivores, and it did, Triceratops was on the menu. The only question was how that meal went. For a long time, this was just a logical guess, two giants sharing a world. Then the fossils started talking. Paleontologists found Triceratops skulls and frills with tooth marks that match the spacing and shape of T-Rex teeth. And crucially, some of those bite wounds show signs of healing. That single detail rewrites the encounter. A healed wound means the Triceratops was bitten and survived and walked away to heal over months or years. These were not one-sided ambushes of doomed prey. At least some of the time, the three-horned animal won, or at least lived. We also know, in grim detail, what happened when it lost. In 1996, researchers described a Triceratops pelvis covered in around 58 tooth punctures from an adult Tyrannosaurus.
Later work, a study memorably titled "How to Eat a Triceratops," reconstructed the technique. The Tyrannosaur would grip the frill and pull, repositioning the carcass to tear the nutrient-rich neck muscles loose, even popping the head off to get at what was underneath. This was a predator that butchered its food with method. To understand why a Triceratops was such a dangerous meal, look at the weapons on both sides. Tyrannosaurus had the most powerful bite of any land animal that has ever been measured, with estimates running into the tens of thousands of newtons, enough force to crush bone outright and leave those deep punctures in solid pelvis. Paired with forward-facing eyes for binocular depth perception and enormous olfactory bulbs for smell, it was an apex hunter, not the pure scavenger some once proposed. The healed bite marks on living prey settle that debate, because you cannot scavenge an animal that then heals and walks away. But Triceratops was built like a living fortress. Large adults reached 9 meters and many tons, with brow horns over a meter long and a wall of bone shielding the neck. A predator lunging for that neck had to get past 2 forward-pointing spears driven by an animal that could turn on a dime. That arms race is why this matchup is so iconic. It is not a giant versus a victim. It is the single most heavily armed predator of its world against the single most heavily armored prey of its world. The two of them locked in the same ecosystem for hundreds of thousands of years. Every meal was a gamble. A tyrannosaur that misjudged a charge could be gored or crippled, and a crippled tyrannosaur was a dead one. The herbivore did not have to win outright. It only had to make the cost of attacking it too high. One caution, because the internet oversells this one. We have rock-solid proof that T-Rex bit Triceratops, and good proof that Triceratops sometimes survived it. There are even reports of cone-shaped puncture marks on tyrannosaur bone that look like they could have come from a ceratopsian horn, hinting the prey fought back. But a single fossil of the two of them locked in combat, the way the fighting dinosaurs are, has never been confirmed. You may have heard of the dueling dinosaurs, a T-Rex and Triceratops buried together and sold to the public as a fight to the death. That specimen is real and being studied, but the idea that they died mid-battle is a story, not yet a fact. The proven version is almost better. Not one duel, but thousands of them, written as scars across millions of years. The next rivalry is 100 million years older than the dinosaurs, and it is the moment the oceans first learned to fear teeth. Number 8. DUNKLEOSTEUS versus the first sharks. The oldest grudge we can still read. Travel back 360 million years to a period so dominated by life in the water that it is nicknamed the Age of Fishes. There were no dinosaurs, nothing walking on land but the earliest amphibians. The apex predator of the entire planet was DUNKLEOSTEUS, an armored fish the size of a car, its head and shoulders sheathed in bony plates, its jaws ending not in teeth, but in two self-sharpening blades of bone that could shear another animal in half. And swimming in the same seas, small, fast, and ancient, were the first true sharks. This is, in a real sense, one of the oldest rivalries we can still reconstruct from the rock, the opening chapter in a contest between armored bony fish and cartilaginous sharks that was already old when the first tree grew. And we know who was winning. Among the most common sharks of the time was Cladoceratopus, a sleek 2-meter hunter that would be a respectable predator in any ocean. To DUNKLEOSTEUS, it was food. We have fossil evidence of this in one of the least glamorous and most convincing forms paleontology offers: regurgitate. DUNKLEOSTEUS appears to have gorged itself and then thrown back up the indigestible parts, leaving behind boluses of fish bone, and the bitten, broken remains in these beds include the early sharks it was eating. The weapon that made this possible was a marvel of engineering, tens of millions of years ahead of its time. Studies of the jaw mechanics show it worked as a system of linked bony levers, snapping open in as little as a 50th of a second to suck prey inward, then slamming shut with a force concentrated at the blade tips that ranks among the highest ever estimated for any fish. A shark that came too close was not bitten so much as inhaled and sheared. The prey in this ancient grudge deserves a closer look, because Cladoceratopus is one of the best preserved early sharks we have. The Cleveland Shale entombed some specimens so completely that we can see the outline of skin and muscle, and even the contents of their stomachs, which show these sharks swallowing fish tail first, the mark of a fast pursuit hunter. In any normal ocean, a sleek 2-meter shark is a serious predator. The problem was that this ocean also contained an armored killing machine in a class of its own. DUNKLEOSTEUS was the crown of the placoderms, the very first jawed vertebrates to seize control of the seas, and for a while, they ruled everything. But this dominance carried a savagery that turned inward too. Some DUNKLEOSTEUS armor plates are scarred with bite marks made by other DUNKLEOSTEUS, evidence that the largest predator of the Devonian also fought and ate its own kind. It was a world without mercy at the top. And then it ended abruptly. The Hagenberg extinction at the close of the Devonian annihilated the placoderms completely, every last armored line, while the sharks, smaller and more adaptable, slipped through the bottleneck and went on to diversify into the thousands of forms that followed. The armored king lost the war that mattered most, the war against extinction, and the underdog inherited the ocean. This rivalry is also the deep root of an arms race that ran for the rest of the history of life. DUNKLEOSTEUS was the first true apex predator with a backbone, the first time a vertebrate sat unchallenged at the very top of the food chain, and it happened in seas that lapped against a world only just being colonized by the first land plants and earliest four-limbed animals. The contest it began, between heavy weaponry and fast, flexible design, would echo through every ocean that followed. A caveat on that phrase: the oldest battle in evolution. Animals were eating each other for hundreds of millions of years before this. Predation itself is far older. What makes DUNKLEOSTEUS and the early sharks special is that it is one of the oldest predator and prey rivalries we can still see clearly, with the hunter, the hunted, and even the leftovers preserved. It is the deep root of an arms race that hundreds of millions of years later would produce the Megalodon. But the armored king did not last. At the end of the Devonian, a mass extinction swept DUNKLEOSTEUS away, and it was the descendants of the sharks it used to eat that inherited the sea. From here, the fight moves on to dry land and into total darkness, where one predator learned to kill another in its sleep. Number 7. Cave lion versus cave bear. The killer in the dark. Picture a cave somewhere in Ice Age Europe, 30 or 40,000 years ago, deep enough that no light reaches it. Far back in that darkness, a cave bear is hibernating.
This was no ordinary bear. The cave bear, Ursus spelaeus, was a giant, the big males rivaling or exceeding a large modern brown bear, sheltering through the brutal winter in a deep sleep, and creeping toward it through the black, silent and deliberate, is a cave lion. The cave lion, Panthera spelaea, was one of the largest cats that ever lived, bigger than a modern African lion. Despite the name, it did not live in caves. It hunted reindeer, horses, bison, and young mammoths out on the open steppe. But the research of paleontologist Cajus Diedrich and others has built a startling case. When prey grew scarce on the frozen plains, especially in the depths of winter, some cave lions went underground, into the hibernation chambers, to kill sleeping cave bears where they lay. The evidence is genuinely eerie.
In the Urșulor cave in Romania, cave lion skeletons were found deep inside, in the midst of the cave bear remains, far from any entrance, where no cat hunting normal prey would have any reason to be. At the Zulithan cave in Germany, a large population of cave lion fossils has been interpreted as specialized cave bear predators. And cave bear vertebrae and bones carry the puncture marks of large carnivores, with some analyses suggesting the lions went in through the soft underside to reach the organs first. Even the bear's behavior may bear the fingerprint of this threat. They chose hibernation spots as deep in the caves as possible, far from the entrances, as if hiding from something. What makes this hunt so unsettling is the nature of the victim. The cave bear was, for all its size, mostly a vegetarian. Studies of its teeth and bone chemistry show a diet heavy in plants, which is part of why it had to gorge and then sleep away the foodless winter in the first place. So the scene is not two equal monsters trading blows. It is an active, meat-eating predator slipping up on a giant herbivore at the one time of year it was utterly helpless. Its metabolism slowed, its body shut down for months. The lion did not have to defeat the bear. It only had to find it sleeping. These were not anonymous animals to the humans who shared their world either. The cave lion is one of the most painted creatures in all of Ice Age art. The walls of Chauvet Cave in France carry a famous panel of lions hunting as a group, and one of the oldest known figurative sculptures, the Lion Man of the Hohenstein Stadel, fuses a human body with a lion's head. We have even recovered cave lion cubs frozen whole in the Siberian permafrost, tens of thousands of years old, their fur and whiskers intact. So we know exactly what this predator looked like. The animal that crept into the dark to kill sleeping bears was the same animal Ice Age people feared and revered enough to carve into the very first art. This picture does lean heavily on one main line of research, and not every detail is settled. Hyenas, for instance, were the main scavengers that later destroyed the cave bear carcasses, which can muddy who killed what. But the core scene holds up. A cat the size of a small car, slipping into total darkness to attack an animal as big as itself, asleep and defenseless. It is one of the most chilling hunts in the entire fossil record, a predator that solved the problem of a dangerous enemy by attacking it at the one moment it could not fight back. Back in the sea, one dynasty of monsters was busy eating the heirs of the rulers it replaced. Number 6. Mosasaurs versus the Plesiosaurs, the takeover of the seas. For much of the age of dinosaurs, the oceans were ruled by long-necked, four-flippered marine reptiles, the plesiosaurs, and their monstrous short-necked cousins, the giant pliosaurs. They were the established royalty of the sea. And then, in the last stretch of the Cretaceous, a new power rose and took the throne by force. The mosasaurs, enormous marine lizards related to today's monitors and snakes, exploded across every ocean on Earth in the final 25 million years before the asteroid. And they did not politely coexist with the old guard. They ate it. We have the proof inside their stomachs. A Tylosaurus, one of the largest mosasaurs at nearly 9 meters, was discovered with the partially digested remains of a plesiosaur preserved in its gut, a find first made by Charles Sternberg back in 1918. Other mosasaur specimens carry the bones of smaller mosasaurs, diving seabirds, sharks, turtles, and fish, a menu that spared almost nothing in the water. The mosasaurs were the new apex, and the surviving plesiosaurs, the long-necked elasmosaurs and the short-necked polycotylids, were now prey. What makes this a true changing of the guard is the weaponry the mosasaurs brought. They had a second set of teeth set into the roof of the mouth, the pterygoid teeth, that worked like a snake's to ratchet large prey down the throat so it could not escape, and a flexible jaw that let them swallow enormous mouthfuls. Combined with a powerful tail fluke for ambush speed, they were built to seize the very animals that had ruled before them. The speed of this takeover is part of what makes it so remarkable. The mosasaurs did not begin as ocean giants. They started, only a little earlier, as modest, semi-aquatic lizards, no bigger than a large monitor, animals like Dillosaurus that still had functional legs.
In a geological eye blink of around 25 million years, that lineage transformed into the supreme predators of every sea on the planet, some reaching 17 meters. They committed so fully to the water that they gave birth in the open ocean, as fossilized embryos and newborns show, never needing to crawl ashore at all. Recent chemistry from their bones even suggests they ran warm, active bodies, more like a hunting mammal than a basking reptile. The plesiosaurs they replaced were the old aristocracy of the sea, a lineage that stretched back to the Triassic and had survived earlier near extinctions. The long-necked elasmosaurs swept their small heads through schools of fish on necks that could be over half their body length. The short-necked polycotylids were fast, dolphin-like pursuit hunters. They were not weak animals. They were simply outmatched by a newer, faster, more powerfully armed design. And one by one, they ended up where Sternberg found them, inside a mosasaur.
When the asteroid struck and the Cretaceous ended, the mosasaurs died with the dinosaurs, and the oceans lost their giant reptiles for good, leaving a vacancy that tens of millions of years later, the whales would step in to fill. The plesiosaurs also gave the late Cretaceous one of its most famous animals almost by accident, because the very town that lends its name to the final age of the dinosaurs, the Maastrichtian, is the same Dutch town whose quarries produced the first great mosasaur skull. The reptile that announced the mosasaurs to science came out of the chalk near Maastricht, and the era of their reign is now named after the place. The new kings did not just take the throne, they gave their age its name. One detail sharpens the story rather than softening it. The truly giant pliosaur kings, the 10-meter monsters, had mostly already vanished in an earlier extinction before the mosasaurs reached their peak. So this was less a duel between reigning champions than a new dynasty hunting down the last heirs of an old one. and stomach contents prove an animal was eaten, not necessarily that it was killed in a fair fight rather than scavenged. But the direction of power is unmistakable. The age of the plesiosaur ended, the age of the mosasaur began, and the transition is preserved, quite literally, as one lying inside the other. The next pairing is not a takeover, but a standoff. Two Ice Age predators so evenly matched they died side by side, in the thousands. Number 5. SMILODON versus the dire wolf. The trap that caught them both. In the heart of Los Angeles, there is a place where the ground bleeds tar. The La Brea tar pits are pools of natural asphalt that for tens of thousands of years have worked as a perfect and terrible trap. A large animal would blunder in and stick fast, and its cries of distress would draw every predator for miles, which would then rush in to feed and become trapped themselves. The result is the richest Ice Age predator graveyard on the planet, and two animals dominated above all others: the saber-toothed cat, SMILODON, and the dire wolf. These were the two great carnivores of Ice Age North America, and at La Brea, their remains number in the thousands. The bones of the saber-tooth and the dire wolf tangled together in the same black pits. They were rivals in the truest sense, competing for the same trapped prey, day after day, century after century. Two completely different designs for killing, aimed at the same goal. SMILODON was the ambush specialist, heavily muscled, with forelimbs strong enough to wrestle prey to the ground, and those famous 7-inch canines to deliver a precise, deep killing bite. The dire wolf was the pursuit hunter, slightly larger and more powerfully built than a modern gray wolf, working in packs to run prey down and dismember it with bone-crushing jaws. The dire wolf has a twist of its own, revealed only recently. For 2 centuries, everyone assumed it was simply a bigger, beefier version of the gray wolf. Then, in 2021, an ancient DNA study showed that the dire wolf was something else entirely, a distinct lineage so old and so separate that it belongs in its own genus, a wolf in shape only, the last survivor of a uniquely American branch of dog-like predators. The animal we pictured as a dire gray wolf was a case of mistaken identity all along. The scale of the La Brea record is hard to overstate. The pits have yielded the remains of more than 2,000 individual saber-toothed cats and around 4,000 dire wolves, which makes the dire wolf the single most common mammal pulled from the asphalt. That ratio tells its own grim story. For every plant eater that blundered in and got stuck, multiple predators were lured in by the easy meal and trapped in turn, a feedback loop of death that ran for tens of thousands of years and preserved an entire Ice Age predator guild in the middle of a modern city. The two rivals were studies in contrast. SMILODON's famous canines, up to 18 centimeters long, were actually fragile, too flat and brittle to risk against bone, so the cat relied on its massively muscled forelimbs to wrestle prey to the ground and immobilize it before placing one precise, deep bite to the throat or belly.
Many SMILODON skeletons show severe injuries that had healed, which some researchers read as a sign that these cats lived in social groups that supported the wounded, a lion-like sociability. The dire wolf needed no such finesse. Slightly larger than a gray wolf and far more powerfully jawed, it hunted in packs and crushed bone, a relentless pursuit predator built to bring down the giant herbivores of the age. Two different answers to the same question, sharing the same hunting grounds, and ultimately, the same tar. La Brea preserves a war of attrition, not a single duel. These two were competitors at the carcass and in the hunt, not gladiators sent to fight one-on-one. But the competition was real and relentless, and in the end, it did not matter who was the better killer. The same tar that fed them swallowed them both, and they vanished together at the close of the last Ice Age, around 10,000 years ago.
Now take one of those saber-tooths and stand it in front of the largest meat-eating land mammal of its world. Number 4. ARCTODUS versus SMILODON, the giant and the saber. Imagine SMILODON has just made a kill. The saber-tooth has done the dangerous, exhausting work of bringing down a bison, and it is settling in to feed. Then it lifts its head, because something enormous is coming, and there is nothing it can do. The newcomer is ARCTODUS simus, the giant short-faced bear, and it is one of the largest carnivorous land mammals that ever lived in North America. Standing on its hind legs, it could reach well over 3 meters, and the biggest individuals may have weighed close to a ton. On long, almost cat-like legs, it towered over everything around it. The likely relationship between these two was not a fair fight. It was robbery.
Many researchers think ARCTODUS made a good part of its living as a kleptoparasite, using its overwhelming size to simply walk up to the kills of other predators, the saber-tooths and the American lions, and take them. A solitary Smilodon, even with those magnificent canines, would have had little choice but to back away from a wall of bear several times its weight. The saber-tooth was the better armed killer. The short-faced bear was the bigger one, and in a confrontation over a carcass, size usually wins. There is one more thing that made ARCTODUS formidable. Its short, broad face gave it a powerful bite, and its long legs have led to a long-running debate about whether it was a pursuit predator, a pure scavenger, or a giant omnivore that did a bit of everything. Isotope studies of its bones point to a heavily meat-based diet, at least in some populations, which fits the image of a dominant carcass thief that also hunted when it suited him.
The short face that gives ARCTODUS its name is a bit of a misnomer. The skull was deep rather than truly short, giving the jaws real crushing power. What set the animal apart was its build, those long, straight limbs that lifted its body high off the ground. For years, this fueled an image of ARCTODUS as a high-speed pursuit hunter chasing down horses across the plains. Though more recent analysis suggests the long legs were about covering huge distances efficiently rather than sprinting, which fits a giant that roamed far and wide in search of carcasses to commandeer. And the competition over those carcasses was even fiercer than a one-on-one with Smilodon, because Ice Age North America was crowded with heavyweight carnivores. There was the saber-tooth, the pack-hunting direwolf, and the American lion, Panthera atrox, a cat even larger than Smilodon, all of them working the same herds and the same kills.
Into that crowded arena walked the short-faced bear, and its strategy was beautifully simple: be too big to argue with. A solitary cat or even a wolf pack standing over a fresh kill faced a brutal choice when a one-ton bear came lumbering up, and usually the choice was to yield. The bear did not need to be the best hunter on the plains. It only needed to be the one nobody else dared to challenge. The short-faced bear ranged across an astonishing sweep of the continent, from Alaska down into Mexico, for hundreds of thousands of years. And then, around 11,000 years ago, it vanished along with most of the Ice Age giants. One leading idea is that its downfall was tied not only to the collapse of the great herds it scavenged, but to a quieter kind of competition: the arrival and spread of the smaller, more flexible brown bear out of Asia, an omnivore that could live on far less. The largest bear was beaten, in the end, not by a bigger animal, but by a more adaptable one. And that debate is the heart of this entry. We do not have a fossil of a short-faced bear and a saber-tooth locked in combat. What we have is a shared world, an overlapping menu, and the simple physics of a one-ton bear meeting a 200-kilogram cat over a fresh kill. The most likely battles between them were not duels to the death, but tense, repeated standoffs, the kind that end with the smaller, deadlier animal choosing to live another day. The next fight throws out the standoff completely,
because both animals in it were, on their own, bigger than Tyrannosaurus rex. Number 3. Spinosaurus versus Carcharodontosaurus. Two giants, one river. Around 95 to 100 million years ago, in what is now the Sahara Desert of Morocco, there was a vast river system teeming with life, and it had a problem that has puzzled scientists for over a century. It was home to not one, but at least two predators larger than Tyrannosaurus rex. The first was Carcharodontosaurus, the shark-toothed lizard, a 13-meter monster with a skull longer than a man is tall, and blade-like serrated teeth for slicing flesh off large dinosaurs. The second was even stranger and even longer, Spinosaurus, perhaps 15 meters from snout to tail, with a huge sail rising from its back and a long crocodile-like jaw. The puzzle is one paleontologist named after Ernst Stromer, the German scientist who first described these animals from Egyptian fossils in the early 20th century. Fossils later destroyed when his museum in Munich was bombed in 1944. How could a single ecosystem feed two such enormous apex predators? The answer, pieced together over decades, is that they almost certainly avoided each other by hunting completely different worlds. A 2014 study and further work in 2020 transformed Spinosaurus into something no one expected. A semi-aquatic dinosaur with a paddle-like tail, dense bones for sinking, and jaws full of conical teeth built to snatch fish. It was a river hunter. Carcharodontosaurus, with its flesh-carving teeth, was a hunter of land animals. So the two giants split the territory. One ruled the water and the riverbanks, the other ruled the dry land, and most days their paths simply did not have to cross. But most days is not every day. At the water's edge, at a stranded carcass, at a contested stretch of riverbank, two of the largest predators in the history of the planet would sometimes have come face to face, and neither was in the habit of backing down. The world these two shared has been called, only half in jest, the most dangerous place in the history of the Earth. The Kem River system did not just hold two giant predators, it teamed with them. Alongside Spinosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus prowled another large theropod, Deltadromeus, while the rivers themselves hid gigantic crocodile relatives capable of taking dinosaurs. The water churned with car-sized fish, and pterosaurs with long-toothed jaws patrolled the skies. How so many huge meat-eaters packed into one ecosystem is the puzzle Stromer first stumbled onto, and the resolution is that each carved out its own niche to avoid directly competing. The two stars carved out the deepest divide of all. Carcharodontosaurus was a relative of the colossal southern predators like Giganotosaurus, and it hunted the way they did, with a relatively lighter bite than Tyrannosaurus, but long, blade-like serrated teeth designed to open massive bleeding wounds in large prey and let blood loss do the rest. Spinosaurus went somewhere no other large dinosaur is known to have gone, into the water. Its 2020 tail, described from a remarkable Moroccan skeleton, was a tall, flexible, fin-like paddle, the clearest evidence yet that this was an animal that actively swam and hunted fish in the river, with conical teeth made for gripping slippery prey rather than slicing flesh. One was a terrestrial butcher, the other was a river leviathan. The genius of their coexistence was that they almost never needed the same meal. This is where I have to level with you, and it is the tension running under the whole list. We have no fossil of a Spinosaurus and a Carcharodontosaurus fighting. What we have is proof, in the rock, that two predators each larger than T-Rex lived side by side in the same place at the same time, which is staggering enough on its own, and the near certainty that animals that size, competing for space and food, sometimes clashed. The battle is an inference, but it is an inference built on solid ground. The next one needs no such caution. It is the most lopsided sounding matchup imaginable, and the underdog was a whale. Number 2. Megalodon versus Livyatan. When a whale hunted the king of sharks. Around 9 million years ago, the oceans held the largest predatory shark that ever lived. Megalodon could reach perhaps 15 to 20 meters, its bite among the most powerful ever to evolve, and it ruled its seas by tearing chunks out of whales. It had no rivals, except one. In the same water, hunting the same prey, swam a monster that could look the king of sharks in the eye, and it was a whale. Livyatan melvillei was a sperm whale, but nothing like the gentle, squid-eating sperm whale of today. It was around the same length as a big megalodon, 13 to 17 meters, and its skull was a weapon. Where the modern sperm whale has a narrow jaw with few working teeth, Livyatan had both jaws lined with teeth up to 36 centimeters long, the largest biting teeth of any animal ever discovered, longer than the largest teeth of T-Rex. These were not for catching squid, they were for seizing and tearing apart large, warm-blooded prey, exactly the medium-sized whales that Megalodon also hunted. So here were two apex predators of roughly the same colossal size, in the same ocean, at the same time eating the same food. They were direct competitors for the throne, and the prey they fought over was the entire reason the throne existed. A meeting between an adult Megalodon and an adult Livyatan would have been one of the most evenly matched and catastrophic encounters in the history of life. Two 16-meter titans, one armed with the deadliest bite among sharks, the other with the deadliest biting teeth among all animals.
To feel how strange this rivalry is, you have to picture the real Megalodon, which recent science has completely rebuilt. For decades, it was imagined as a great white shark, scaled up to monstrous size. But a 2024 study by a team of 24 shark experts concluded that the great white model was wrong, that Megalodon's vertebrae point to a longer, more slender body, more like an enormous mako or lemon shark, a streamlined cruiser rather than a stocky tank. Other recent work on the chemistry of its teeth suggests it was partly warm-blooded, able to keep its body hotter than the surrounding water, which would have made it a faster, more powerful hunter. This was not a dumb giant. It was a high-performance predator at the very peak of what a shark can be. And it still had to share its ocean with Livyatan. The whale's skull alone was around 3 meters long, and on top of it sat the deep basin that in modern sperm whales houses the spermaceti organ, a structure used to focus sound, and possibly, in Livyatan's case, to deliver ramming blows. The Miocene seas they both hunted, preserved so beautifully in the Pisco Formation of Peru, were thick with prey and rivals. Seals, smaller whales, sharks of every size, and bony-beaked seabirds with 6-meter wingspans. In that crowded, violent ocean, the shark and the whale were the two undisputed champions, and they wanted the exact same thing. There was no version of that world in which they could both ignore each other. These teeth have been famous for an astonishingly long time.
The largest Megalodon teeth are over 18 centimeters long, the size of a human hand, and people dug them up for thousands of years without knowing what they were, calling them tongue stones and believing they were the petrified tongues of dragons, until, in the 1600s, the scientist Nicholas Steno recognized them as the teeth of a giant shark. We have even found what appear to be Megalodon nurseries, shallow coastal areas littered with the small teeth of juveniles, where the pups grew up in safety before moving into open water. This was a shark with a life cycle, a strategy, a whole way of being the largest predatory fish that ever lived, right up until the oceans cooled at the end of its age, and the whales it depended on shifted toward the poles, taking the king of sharks down with them. As always, there is no fossil of the two of them actually fighting. There is no Livyatan with a Megalodon tooth in its bones, no smoking gun. The battle is built from overlap, in size, in time, in place, and above all, in prey. But that overlap is precisely what makes it so compelling, because two predators this large cannot share a food supply peacefully. They were rivals by necessity, and the sheer fact of a whale that outarmed the most famous shark in history is enough. Then, within a few million years, both of them vanished as the oceans cooled and their prey moved on. Which brings us, finally, to the last battle on this list, and the only one whose outcome you are carrying inside you right now. Number 1. Homo sapiens versus the Neanderthals. The war you won and never finished. Every other fight on this list is over, sealed in stone, settled long ago. This one is not, because you are the result of it, and a piece of it is still inside your body. Around 50,000 years ago, our species, Homo sapiens, spread out of Africa into a Europe and Asia that were already inhabited.
They had been held by another kind of human for hundreds of thousands of years, the Neanderthals. Stockier than us, with bigger brains by raw volume, superbly adapted to the Ice Age cold, master tool makers and hunters of the largest game. For thousands of years, two different species of human shared the same continents, and only one of them is still here. What happened between us is one of the most charged questions in all of science, and the truthful answer is that it was not a single war with a single battle. It was a slow overlap of perhaps several thousand years, and it almost certainly involved everything two competing human groups can do to each other. Competition for the same prey and the same shelter, very likely violence in places, and, unmistakably, something far more intimate. Because here is the discovery that changes the whole story. We did not only fight the Neanderthals, we had children with them. The proof is written in your cells. In late 2024, two landmark studies, one in Nature and one in Science, pinned down the timing with more precision than ever before. The main period of interbreeding between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals happened in a single sustained stretch, peaking around 47,000 years ago, lasting roughly 7,000 years. And the legacy of those encounters never left us. Today, every person whose ancestry traces outside Africa carries between 1% and 2% Neanderthal DNA in their genome. People of East Asian descent carry around 20% more of it than Europeans. Those inherited genes are not junk. They shape our skin and hair, our immune systems, our metabolism, the way our bodies fight disease to this day. It would be a mistake to imagine the Neanderthals as the brutish losers of the old caricature. They were nothing of the kind. They cared for their sick and injured, sometimes for years. They buried their dead. They controlled fire, made sophisticated tools, used pigments, and wore ornaments. There is even evidence from cave paintings in Spain dated to more than 60,000 years ago, before our species is thought to have arrived in the region, that Neanderthals made art on cave walls. By almost every measure we once used to define ourselves as special, they qualified too. This was not a war between humans and beasts. It was a war between two kinds of human, each fully a person. Nor were they the only other humans in the story. To the east lived a third group, the Denisovans, known mostly from DNA and a handful of bones, and our ancestors interbred with them as well, which is why some populations today, particularly in Oceania, carry Denisovan genes alongside the Neanderthal ones. For a brief window, the Earth held several kinds of human at once, meeting, trading, fighting, and mixing. The legacy of that mixing is not always gentle either. Some Neanderthal genes we inherited strengthen our immune response, while others raise the risk of certain modern diseases. One stretch of Neanderthal DNA was even linked to a higher risk of severe illness from a recent pandemic virus. The ghosts in our genome are not decorations. They are still actively shaping how we live and die. Look at the geography and the clock of it.
Our species pushed out of Africa and into Neanderthal territory around 50,000 years ago. And within roughly 10,000 years, the Neanderthals were gone, with the last known holdouts clinging on at the far western edge of Europe, in places like the caves of Gibraltar. The oldest Homo sapiens genomes we have ever sequenced, from individuals who lived around 45,000 years ago at Ranis in Germany and Zlatý Kun in the Czech Republic, already carry Neanderthal DNA, which means the mixing had happened before these people lived. Exactly why the Neanderthals faded as we arrived is still argued over. A harsher, wildly swinging Ice Age climate? Their smaller and more scattered populations? Perhaps new diseases carried by the newcomers? Perhaps simply being outnumbered generation after generation until their distinct line dissolved into ours. So who won? On the surface, we did. By around 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals were gone, outlasted and absorbed by the wave of newcomers. And exactly why they disappeared, whether we outcompeted them, killed them, simply outnumbered and absorbed them, or some mix of all of it, is still fiercely debated. But the more you look at it, the stranger the word "one" becomes. The Neanderthals did not entirely die out, they were folded into us. They live on, fragment by fragment, in the DNA of billions of people walking around today, including, almost certainly, you. Every other battle on this list ended in a fossil.
This one ended in a genome, and the losing side is still here, hiding in the winners. Finale. Look back at the 10 and notice how rarely we actually got to see the fight. We watched a raptor and its prey frozen mid-strike, and we read T-Rex attacks in the healed scars of the animals that survived them. We found an armored fish's leftovers, traced a lion into the dark after a sleeping bear, and pulled a plesiosaur out of the stomach of the monster that replaced it. We watched a saber-tooth and a direwolf drown together in the same tar, sized up a giant bear against a saber-toothed cat, and stood two predators larger than T-Rex on the opposite banks of the same river. We matched the king of sharks against the whale that hunted it, and we ended inside our own DNA. That is the quiet truth under all of this. The fossil record almost never hands us a clean duel with a winner and a loser. It hands us scars, stomach contents, overlapping bones, and shared ground. And from those clues, we reconstruct the violence that shaped the living world. Some of these battles are proven beyond doubt. Some, the ones we flagged as we went, are powerful inferences, fights we are nearly certain happened but cannot yet watch. That gap between what we know and what we can prove is not a weakness of the story. It is the story, the reason paleontologists keep digging. And the last battle is the one that should stay with you, because it never really ended. Two kinds of human met, competed, fought, and loved, and one of them vanished from the earth, only to survive inside the other. The next time someone tells you the age of monsters is over, remember that the most consequential predator battle in the history of the planet was fought by something that looked almost exactly like you, and that you are carrying the outcome in every cell of your body. It is worth holding on to one more thought about that final battle, because it reframes the whole list. Every other fight here was decided by tooth, claw, size, or speed. The contest between Homo sapiens and the Neanderthals may have come down to none of those things, and instead to networks, to the way our ancestors connected across vast distances, traded, shared ideas, and rebuilt their numbers after hard times. The Neanderthals were individually our equals, and in some ways our superiors, stronger, cold-adapted, every bit as intelligent. They may have lost not because they were weaker, but because they were fewer and more alone. If this changed how you picture the ancient world, subscribe, because we have far more of these buried stories to dig up. And tell me in the comments, out of all 10, which battle would you most want to have witnessed with your own eyes? Until next time.